Like many other fans of the series, I was looking forward to getting another installment of Dragon Age after a decade of waiting. I knew that BioWare has hit some bad times with certain releases, but I was still happy that the franchise is going to continue. And then the trailer dropped. My enthusiasm went from I can't wait to return to this fantasy world to yeah, I guess I'll play this somewhere down the line with a heavy discount. And then the actual game released and the real shit show has started. Gaming journalists gave it amazing praise, high score, and of course all parroting that famous phrase. But then you get to independent critics and the tune is quite the opposite. I have watched the game getting absolutely clowned on in the coming weeks, with my feeds getting filled with clips and memes from the game that were giving off quite a definitive picture of what it is. By the time the uproar died down and the game faded to obscurity, I was thoroughly convinced that I am never playing this abomination. Fast forward a year, Battlefield 6 comes out and I want to try it, but I do not feel like dropping 70 euros on it. Some of my friends also expressed interest though, so we all pay EA subscription to give it a try for a month. And we mostly enjoy it, only it turns out, sadly, that a group of people in their 30s with full-time jobs can't really coordinate so easily. Playing on my own grew boring quite fast, so I looked at what else my EA sub has to offer, and there it was. At this point my subscription is paid, so I might as well give this game a chance while I have it, if for nothing other than a morbid curiosity. And something unexpected happens. I actually like the game. Before I know it, I am 20 hours in, I want to see where this story goes and I'm looking forward to playing more whenever I find the time. Despite the presentation of the Veilguard, I am mostly happy to be back in the world of Taash, and by the time my subscription expires I have no problem actually buying the game to continue playing. I will admit that it was on sale by then, so dropping 20 euros instead of 70 was a lot easier to justify to myself, but I'll also say that it is quite a rare occurrence for me to buy game at full price on release these days. So what the hell happened, right? Well, I'll be the first to admit that my positive opinion of the game probably largely came from expecting the absolute worst, at which point you can only be positively surprised. I was forewarned about a lot of negatives of the game, and when I got to experience them myself, I was happy to find them nowhere near as bad as I initially believed they are going to be. This, paired with just being happy that there is more Dragon Age, summed up to an overall positive experience. But then I got to thinking, why were the problems that so many other people seemingly couldn't forgive not such a big concern for me? Well, to start with, the biggest problem of the game is its overall shift in atmosphere and tone, the style and graphics and the purple, so much color purple. It is especially jarring if you compare it with the origins of the series. You go from very dark fantasy setting to something that at a glance feels like a kid-friendly animated movie. But the thing is, I feel like I have been through something similar with every new entry to this franchise. Dragon Age games have always been series of separate stories set in a same universe. Every new installment had its own self-contained story taking place in a new location, with a new protagonist and mostly new roster of companions. The choices made in previous installments carrying over was a nice touch, but let's take off the nostalgia goggles and admit that unlike Mass Effect, the results were mostly changes to codex entries and glorified cameos at best. The tone of graphical presentation also changed each time from realistic but dirty, grimy and very bloody to clean and cartoony, but still quite bloody, back to realistic but polished, clean and green. Therefore, Veilguard's graphical shift did not come as such a shock. The tone and scope of the stories changed each time too. Origins was dark but also quite epic fantasy of hero's journey to save the kingdom from ultimate evil that's more like a natural disaster than actual antagonist. The second game was much smaller and personal story of Hawk and his family.
No.
Okay, Hawk and his mom?
No force on this earth will part us.
Okay, just Hawk, moving up in brutal and unforgiving world and somehow getting tangled up in world-changing events. And then in Inquisition it's back to saving the world again, only this time it's demons instead of blight. There is a much heavier emphasis on a belief and religion and actual antagonist, such as he was.
Beg that I succeed, for I have seen the throne of the gods, and it was empty.
The overall consistency of this series up to this point could be described as
parkour!
But despite the first three games being also very different from one another, I've enjoyed each one of them for what it was, so in retrospect, it should not have surprised me that I ended up having a good time with Veilguard too. I do understand that the change is too much for many fans, but I can't shake the feeling that a lot of people saying this is not a Dragon Age game actually mean this is not a Dragon Age Origins game. I personally found that there is still a lot of the Taash magic in Veilguard, as well as number of dark and gory elements that you would not come to expect based on how the game presents itself. But let's move on to another big complaint, which is the main character. I understand that not having a real choice of how your protagonist behaves is very frustrating for many people. It is a role-playing game after all, but how you play your rogue ranges from mostly good, good-ish, or swell. If you compare it to Hero of Ferelden ranging from naively heroic to a fucking psychopath, this is a clear downgrade. I don't really have anything to say in the defense of this, and I respect everyone's dislike of the game due to this reason. Only thing I can say why this didn't really bother me personally, yeah, I'm one of those players. And let's be real, even Dragon Age Origins, you are actively encouraged to pursue high approval by being rewarded with extra dialogues, quests, abilities, and your companions not leaving you or, dying. So I imagine I'm not the only one who doesn't really take much advantage of game allowing you to be a total piece of shit. But again, I fully understand and support the criticism, which is actually about taking the choice away and forcing you to play a certain way. I guess I'm just lucky that way is how I would play anyway. Speaking of interacting with companions, I found most of them to be fine and interesting. Some were more bland than others, and had stories that were kind of predictable and formulaic, but I was still happy listening to their dialogue and going through their personal quests. And then there is Taash. Remember those clips and memes? Yeah, I feel like she is the star of at least 80% of them, being the absolute lightning rod for all the negativity this game has received. I honestly believe that if the role of the dragon expert for this game went to Iron Bull instead, big portion of the shit talk would disappear. Not only would you continue the tradition of carrying over one companion from previous installment, you would also be bringing back one of the more beloved companions from Inquisition, who was already established to be a little bit excited about prospect of dragon hunting.
Let's find the dragon!
And yes, I know that he can die in Trespasser, but it's not like BioWare hasn't pulled resurrection for certain characters before. Hang on, you mean to tell me that people really like this attractive redhead bard with French accent and a cool spymaster backstory? Well, we should include her in the future games, right? Shit, but we made her killable in the very first one. Well, fuck it, I got a perfect way to fix that.
Were you killed?
Sadly, yes. But I lived.
Yeah, whatever, good enough for those 3 monsters that imported a save with her dead. Anyway, where was I? Oh yes, Taash. I could probably double the length of this video by listing all the issues I had with her, but I'll say this instead. The problems with Taash are representative of the overall problems of writing in this game, only this character takes them to their absolute peak. Not being able to tell somebody to shut it when they are acting like asshole. Tonal whiplash of dealing with insignificant personal crap while the world is on the brink of distraction. The game forcing you to pretty much support something you might disagree with otherwise. Immersion breaking modern day dialogue. Yeah, the writing is unfortunately quite weak, sanitized, and worst of all, subscribes to that beloved latest hit modern storytelling, tell don't show. And especially if you compare this with what came before.
Now she does feast, as she's become the beast.
I fully understand why this game got completely demolished for it and why most people see it in one of 2 ways. But this is all information that others have already dug their claws into much more and much better than I ever could, so I don't want to spend too much time beating this particularly dead horse. All I will say that despite the quality of writing, I can't say that it was a deal breaker for me completely ruining my experience. Again, maybe because I knew well in advance what I will be getting, or maybe I've just gotten used to it quickly and stopped focusing on the negative, realizing that I am just happy to be getting new information about this fantasy world with every new dialogue. It actually felt kind of similar to my overall reception of Taash, where my initial opinion could not have started lower, cringing every time she opened her mouth and hitting instant replay to gather footage for a video about how much I hate this character. But as her story progressed and I've started noticing that there are actually hints of character development, I have to admit that I've gradually warmed up even to her. And what really helped was that I've got to experience a lot of those mentioned clips and memes for myself and see them in full context. Like this beloved scene I've read about over and over again about how Taash refuses to use Emeric's name, instead choosing Deathmage and other less polite terms. By the way, the implication of her calling Necromancer a skullfucker is one of the funniest things I've heard in fantasy. In this one instance, I don't care, it breaks immersion. But anyway, Taash, who apparently demands from others to adjust their language for her sake, refuses to use somebody's name. Of course this is highly hypocritical, right? Well, when I got to this point, I was surprised that the scene is much more about Taash lashing out due to being unable to express her aversion to necromancy and her inability to communicate it clearly.
Oh.
And now suddenly this character that is all about struggling with something that only a very minor percentage of people can relate to or even understand is having a problem that absolutely everyone can fully understand. Well, almost everyone.
Do you happen to know what the fine is here in Cyrodiil for necrophilia? Just asking.
Being creeped out by corpses is completely natural even before they start moving, yet everyone around is seemingly acting like it's not a problem and the walking skeleton is a cute comedic relief. This scene that is often used to shit on Taash actually ended up making her a more interesting character to me. I've also noticed that the interactions with Emmerich became much friendlier and polite past this point, showing that she is capable of change instead of just steamrolling over everyone as her portrayal might make you initially believe. By the end, I've actually felt bad for using this picture for my meme video, now that I know what actually happens at this point of the game. So yes, Taash also ended up better than I was expecting, even if that's not such a high praise since I was expecting the worst. And speaking of expecting the worst, let's talk about the combat now. I was expecting a very bland hack and slash gameplay with higher difficulty just meaning bigger health bars on enemies, so based on what I've heard in reviews, I've started on a lower difficulty than I normally would. What I got sure seemed simple enough initially: set up and detonate system between the three classes, using abilities on cooldown, dodge, parry and hit things till they are dead. As I progressed my warrior into warden spec, my build so to speak was just put on any equipment and work towards any skill with fire icon in its description and move on. But even then I've already noticed how some skills and abilities compound on each other nicely, instead of just being percentage increases. About midpoint in the game, it was getting quite repetitive and not challenging, so I've decided to increase the difficulty. The parry timing became significantly shorter and enemies hit a lot harder, making combat a lot more engaging and making me appreciate all the green vases everywhere a lot more than before. And yes, enemies did take a lot longer to kill, which finally motivated me to properly look into combat system and discovering that I have not been properly using all the mechanics, especially the critical condition.
What the fuck is that?
Now I suddenly find myself figuring out how I can make sure my enemies are shocked before hitting them with a fire ability. I guess I gotta take Bellara, the go-to electricity companion everywhere, right? But wait, look, Nev has an item that also lets her apply shock instead of chill. I can also swap my fire belt for electricity belt on my character to cast it on potion use, and look, there is also an enchant that lets any companion's weapon apply this debuff on attack my target. And speaking of enchants, I can enchant my ring to have all ability crits apply shock as well, giving my very fire-based rook access to the second much needed element. With all this, I've started clearing encounters much faster and with more enjoyment, even though I was on a higher difficulty. My point is, discovering all this system that previously felt like just a very surface level busy work felt actually very vindicating, but it also made me feel stupid knowing that I've essentially played half of the game wrong up until this point. And I know that's on me, but at least part of this was because I was once again going into this not expecting any depth or complexity. So, the combat also ended up being a positive surprise. I could really feel my character progress as it leveled up, and many of the unlockable skills and upgradable items had proper impact on how I played. And although my rook did play more like a demo man by the end rather than a sword and board warrior, I can't say that it wasn't fun. I do wish that the party would consist of 4 members, allowing for even larger variety to rosters and combos. And of course it would be great if the companions would be fully playable like in the previous installments. But I understand that this type of action combat with dodging and parrying is not an easy fit for that. I just wish they would try to seek some sort of middle ground instead of going full Mass Effect with this one. And now we arrive to the lore. As you probably gathered by now from my repeated statements of enjoying the world of Taash, this was the big one. Based on the overall atmosphere I was getting online, I expected to be treated into an absolute insult to the previously established world. A bunch of lore-breaking nonsense, big retcons coming out of nowhere, glaring plot holes, and overall, fuck what came before, we can do so much better attitude that by now a lot of us are unfortunately way too familiar with. But, to be honest, I did not feel much of that. I was actually enjoying new reveals, feeling like they are nicely expanding on existing foundations, and even in times when I was thinking, hang on, this might be contradicting something from previous installments. It often ended up being addressed and providing in-universe explanation that left me satisfied. Like this example with Harding, where you visit this dwarven mountain fortress for the first time and I am thinking, hey, hang on, how did the dwarves build this surface fortress when I remember from previous games that staying underground is a very big deal for them?
Don't fall into the sky when you go back up there.
And then the second visit goes like this.
Stalgard told me about this place. The mountain is rich with lyrium, and the dwarves built this outpost to trade with Tevinter. As long as a dwarf stayed within the fort's walls, it would be as though they hadn't left the stone. They could keep their caste, name, and status.
Right. Traditional dwarves are particular about avoiding the surface.
The Kalsharak don't care about those rules, but Orzammar does.
I know I've probably chosen the least controversial lore example to show, and there is plenty to talk about how the game portrays the Winter, Kunari, Antivan Crows, elves, and much more, but I do plan on making more videos diving deeper into these topics. My point right now is that moments like these really made me feel like there are still a lot of people deeply caring for the world of Theta's working in the husk of BioWare, doing their very best to organically fit in stupid demands of agenda-pushing leadership and fucking suits chasing those juicy ESG funds. And I just want those devs to know I really appreciate the work you've done, as I can only imagine what the situation must have been like for you. Should we have someone call an elf knife ears? Still, by the time I finished the game, I was thinking to myself, so what exactly are the big lore-related problems? Let's ask the internet and... oh fuck. Oh no. Well, after going through a lot of the content to educate myself, I got a sense that most of the critiques are still about the tone and atmosphere of the game as opposed to actually breaks of the established lore. A lot of it seemed like intentional misunderstandings or misinterpretations. Hey yo, what the fuck? Solas in Inquisition is all about accepting blood magic and now here he is saying this shit?
Firstly, I abhor the use of blood magic.
Oh wow, the literal god of lies that spends his whole screen time manipulating the previous protagonist would stoop so low as to switch up his story for the new one? I understand it makes for a fun content to put such clips together, and I also get that it might come from a valid criticism of Veilguard avoiding tougher topics like blood magic, but come on. Either you didn't play the game past the prologue, or you are being intentionally misleading. I don't know if this is worse or lore critiquing videos actually using arguments like, in the first game the Chantry states that the origin of Blight is one thing and Veilguard now states it is a different thing, so... you stupid writers don't even know your own lore anymore. To that, I say, I always really liked how Dragon Age series handled world building. It very openly admits that there are so many unknowns in this world and we are often working with estimates and guesses. The knowledge usually comes from myths, legends and religious beliefs, and it also makes it very clear that Theta's is full of historical bias.
Told by whom? A history that has been dictated by the victors, no doubt.
But such nuances tend to go out the window when you're in a rush to hate on the unpopular thing. Sure, everything is open to criticism, especially on the internet, but why the need to present the things as plot holes and retcons when it's more like just, why didn't you do what I wanted? And this fan theory is so much better than what you did. One example that I've noticed a lot. Evanuris, the main villains of the game and their apparent involvement behind a lot of events that came before. This is a big one that so many of the videos I've seen seemingly cannot forgive. Those who played the game know exactly what I mean, and I do want to keep this light on the spoilers still. But to sum it up, complaints are that they are your "it was me all along, Barry" types of villains that were pulled out of nowhere and inserted into the established world with the subtlety of Zevran's so-called assassination attempt.
The Grey Warden dies here!
Nice job being stealthy there, bro. But if the Evanuris indeed came out of nowhere, then why are there a lot of fan theories from long ago theorizing exactly what happens in Veilguard? Or why is David Gaider, the original author of Dragon Age Universe, hinting at possible connections as far back as 2009? I don't know, I have seen franchises pull this kind of shit before, ranging between meh to bad to frustrating to hilariously, insultingly horrible, and I just was not getting the same feeling from Dragon Age Veilguard at all. And yes, I know about the secret ending, but I am not gonna condemn a whole game on a 50-second slideshow at the end of it that serves to tease the upcoming installments. Should those ever come out, unlikely as it is, I'll be happy to admit that I was talking out of my ass here if they end up going that way. And one last thing that I found most sad was when people claiming to love the series and its lore resort to just straight up lies in their haste to dogpile on this entry. Multiple videos I've seen claim that the popular theory that Andraste is another reincarnation of Mythal is confirmed in this game. This is used to further support the criticism that elven gods are really behind everything. And all it takes is this one line from Morrigan.
The other once fell in love with an Alamari chieftain and lived happily in a swamp for centuries.
That's it. That's all there is in the whole game. However, if you do not conveniently crop the Dragon Age wiki to show only what you need, you'd see that only 17 years passed between Andraste's wedding and stake burning, which is not exactly living happily in a swamp for centuries, is it? I mean, there is a lot of valid criticism to go around, so why the need to manufacture more? Anyway, I could talk about the lore for hours, but that's not really possible without spoiling the game too much, so I'll save it for another time. The game has really reignited my interest in this world and got me replaying the previous one, and not in a spiteful I need to cleanse myself now way. I've also gotten into the Dragon Age novels and comics thanks to it, and even with knowing where it all leads, I've been enjoying them a lot. So when I do get to talking about lore, I hope it will be coming from quite an informed place. With all that being said, playing Veilguard kept me thinking about how much my opinion differs from what I've expected, and to what extent is it due to reading and hearing opinions from two extreme sides. I feel like this game was the perfect storm of every action has an opposite and equal reaction, and the more one side initially praised it, more the other side needed to destroy it. Like many people, I consider game journalists and critics to be mostly a meme at this point, routinely having their opinion be opposite of the customers, and this game took this divide to its extreme. But I need to make this absolutely clear, that despite finding some of the criticisms to be overblown and not always fair, I do not blame anybody other than BioWare and EA for how the game's reception went. They knew exactly what kind of game they are releasing, and anybody with 2 brain cells could have predicted how it will turn out. Either they are too stupid to realize it, they just didn't care, or this is all just a part of big conspiracy to ruin beloved single-player franchises, so they can justify to geriatric stakeholders that they should be only focusing on live-action slop and annual releases of the same thing. So despite my overall enjoyment of Veilguard and the painful knowledge that this likely means this universe is done, I am glad that the game has been a commercial flop, since I hope it will have a long-term positive effect on the industry. The game could have been so much more, but instead it will remain forever as yet another sad reminder of what happens when you fuck with something people are really passionate about. So what's even the point of this video, right? The game is out for over a year, the discourse is long dead, the verdict has been fully rendered. I do not have any aspirations of changing anyone's opinion of the game, but maybe it will give a different point of view for those like me who could stumble into playing it eventually. But anyway, the point is that I have been contemplating starting a channel where I talk about my thoughts on video games I play, and what better way to make sure I'll be dead on arrival than talking mostly positively about one of the most hated games from the recent years.